The house on Maple Street had been too quiet for too long. Robert Hayes, 68 years old, sat in his worn leather armchair, the same one where his wife Margaret used to read before the cancer took her. The television hummed low in the background, some late-night rerun he wasn't really watching. Outside, November rain tapped against the windows of the old two-story home in Portland, Oregon, where the trees always seemed to weep and the fog never fully lifted. It had been 4 years since the accident. 4 years since his daughter Emily died in that car crash on Highway 26. 4 years since Robert became a ghost in his own home. If this story is gripping you from the very first moment, consider subscribing to support this channel. Stories like this take time, heart, and research to bring to life. The house felt enormous now. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen that once smelled like Margaret's cinnamon rolls and Emily's laughter. Now it just smelled like dust and regret. Robert had thought about selling it 100 times, but he couldn't. This was where Emily grew up, where she learned to walk, where she brought home her first boyfriend, where she cried in his arms when Margaret died. Leaving would feel like erasing her. He glanced at the clock on the mantel, 12:47 a.m. He should go to bed, but sleep didn't come easily anymore. It hadn't for years. Robert pushed himself out of the chair and shuffled to the kitchen. His knees ached, the kind of deep, bone-tired ache that reminded him he wasn't young anymore. He poured himself a glass of water and stared out the window at the rain-soaked street. The neighborhood was dark and still. The Callahans' house across the street had one light on, probably Roger up late with his insomnia again. Beyond that, nothing, just wet pavement reflecting the glow of street lamps. Robert set the glass down and rubbed his eyes. He was tired, so tired. He turned to head back to the living room when he saw it. On the kitchen table, next to a stack of unopened mail, was a photograph he didn't remember putting there. It was Emily, taken at her college graduation, cap tilted slightly, that bright, mischievous smile she always wore. Margaret stood beside her, beaming with pride. Robert had been the one holding the camera that day. He picked up the photo with trembling hands. When had he taken this out? He kept all of Emily's pictures in a box upstairs, tucked away where they wouldn't ambush him every morning. Maybe he'd pulled it out last week and forgotten. Memory wasn't what it used to be. He was about to set it down when he noticed something written on the back, faint in pencil, almost faded. When we're afraid of the dark, we light the fire inside our hearts. Robert's breath caught. That phrase. Margaret used to say it to Emily when she was little and scared of thunderstorms. They'd made it their family motto, a secret code just for the 3 of them. But Robert hadn't written this, and Margaret had been gone for 6 years. A chill ran down his spine. He set the photo down carefully as if it might shatter and looked around the kitchen. Everything was still, normal. The refrigerator hummed. The rain pattered against the window. Nothing was wrong, but something felt wrong. Robert returned to the living room, sat back down in his chair, and tried to focus on the television. A detective show. Someone was chasing someone else through a parking garage. He didn't care. The clock ticked. 12:54 a.m. 12:55 a.m. 12:58 a.m. And then the phone rang. Robert's head snapped up. The landline, mounted on the wall in the hallway, shrieked into the silence. Once, twice. Nobody called the landline anymore. Telemarketers, maybe. Wrong numbers. But never at 1 a.m. Third ring. Robert stood slowly, his heart starting to pound in a way that felt unnatural. Wrong. He crossed the hardwood floor, each step echoing in the stillness. Fourth ring. He reached for the receiver, his hand hovering just above it. Fifth ring. He picked it up. Hello? Static. Faint, crackling, like an old radio searching for a signal, and then breathing. Soft, feminine, trembling. Dad! Robert's blood turned to ice. That voice. Open the door. I'm cold. His knees buckled. He gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling. Emily, he whispered, his throat tight, barely able to form the word. Please, Dad. It's raining. I'm so cold. Open the door. His heart hammered against his ribs. This wasn't possible. Emily was dead. He'd buried her. He'd stood over her grave and watched them lower the casket into the ground. He'd touched the cold wood and said goodbye. This isn't real, he stammered. You're not. When we're afraid of the dark, we light the fire inside our hearts. The world tilted. Robert's legs nearly gave out. He braced himself against the wall. The phone pressed so hard against his ear it hurt. That phrase, that exact phrase, the one from the photograph, the one only the 3 of them knew. Emily, His voice cracked, raw and broken. "Where are you?" "I'm outside, Dad. Please, I need you." The line didn't go dead. He could still hear her breathing, soft, desperate, real. And then, faintly, he heard it again. Not through the phone, through the door. "Dad, please." Robert's body moved on instinct, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. His feet carried him to the front door. His hand, trembling violently, touched the cold brass knob. He leaned forward and looked through the peephole, and there she was. Standing on the porch under the dim yellow light, soaked from the rain, was Emily. She wore the same grey jacket she'd been wearing the day she died. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, just like always. Her face, pale, tired, but undeniably hers, stared directly at the door. She raised one hand and placed it gently against the wood, fingers splayed. "Dad, I'm here. I'm so cold." Robert's mind screamed at him that this was impossible. Dead people don't come back. Ghosts aren't real. This was a dream, a hallucination, a cruel trick of grief and exhaustion. But his heart, his broken, desperate, grieving heart, wanted so badly to believe. He fumbled with the lock, his hands shaking so hard he could barely grip it. The deadbolt clicked. He turned the knob, pulled the door open. The porch was empty. Rain fell in sheets, drumming against the wooden planks. The street lamp flickered, but there was no one there. "Emily!" Robert stepped outside, barefoot, the cold, rain soaking through his thin shirt. "Emily, where are you?" His voice echoed into the night, swallowed by the storm. Nothing, only the hiss of rain and the distant hum of traffic on the highway. He stood there, shaking, scanning the yard, the street, the shadows beneath the trees. Nothing moved. No one was there. A light flicked on across the street. Mr. Callahan's face appeared in the window, concerned, watching. Robert retreated inside, closed the door, and locked it. He slid down against the wood and sat on the floor, his head in his hands, soaked and shivering. It wasn't real, it couldn't be real. But when he looked down, he saw them. Wet footprints, small, barefoot, leading from the porch steps to the door, and on the doorknob, just above where his hand had been, a handprint, still damp. Robert stared at it, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. And for the first time in 4 years, he wasn't sure if he was awake or drowning in a nightmare he couldn't escape. Robert didn't. Sleep? He couldn't. He sat on the floor by the door until the grey light of dawn crept through the windows. His clothes were still damp, his body ached, but he didn't move. He stared at the handprint on the doorknob. It had dried now, faint but still visible, a ghostly outline of fingers that shouldn't exist. At some point he forced himself to stand. His legs were stiff, his back screaming in protest. He walked to the kitchen, filled the coffee pot with shaking hands, and stood there watching it brew, his mind spinning in circles. It wasn't real. It couldn't have been real. But the footprints were real. The handprint was real. The voice was real. Or was it? Maybe Nathan was right. Maybe grief had finally broken something inside him. Maybe his mind was playing tricks, conjuring Emily's voice, her face, her touch, because he couldn't let her go. The coffee finished brewing. Robert poured a cup, black, and sat at the kitchen table. He didn't drink it. He just held it, feeling the warmth against his palms, anchoring himself to something solid. The photograph was still there, the one with the phrase written on the back. He picked it up again, turned it over, read the words. "When we're afraid of the dark, we light the fire inside our hearts." He hadn't written that, he was sure of it. But who had? A knock at the door jolted him from his thoughts. He stood quickly, spilling coffee on the table. His heart raced. "Emily? No, don't be stupid." He crossed to the front door and looked. Through the peephole, Roger and Teresa Callahan stood on the porch, both in their 70s, both looking worried. Robert opened the door. "Morning, Robert," Roger said gently. He held a cane in one hand and wore a thick flannel jacket against the cold. We saw you outside last night, in the rain. Are you all right?" Teresa stepped forward, her soft blue eyes full of concern. "Honey, you looked like you were calling for someone. We got worried." Robert forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm fine, just a bad dream. Thought I heard something." "At 1 in the morning?" Teresa asked gently. "Robert, that's not—" "I said I'm fine." The words came out sharper than he intended. Teresa flinched. Roger put a steadying hand on her shoulder. "We're not trying to pry," Roger said carefully. "We're just worried about you. You've been alone in this house for so long. And with the anniversary of Emily's accident coming up next month," Robert's jaw tightened. "I don't need pity. It's..." Not pity, Teresa said softly. It's care. Robert, have you thought about talking to someone, a counselor or... I don't need a counselor. Maybe not, Roger said, but it wouldn't hurt. Grief, it does things to us. Makes us see things that aren't there. Hear things. Robert stared at him. What are you saying? Roger hesitated. I'm saying that if you're hearing voices or seeing people who aren't there, that's okay. It doesn't make you crazy. It just means you're hurting. And there's help for that. Robert's chest tightened. He wanted to tell them about the call, the footprints, the handprint, but he couldn't. They'd think he was losing his mind. Maybe he was. I appreciate your concern, Robert said quietly, but I'm fine. The Callahans exchanged a glance. Teresa reached out and squeezed his hand. If you need anything at all, we're right across the street. I know. Thank you. After they left, Robert closed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. They think I'm crazy. Maybe they were right. The rest of the morning passed in a fog. Robert tried to keep busy, washing dishes, vacuuming the living room, sorting through mail, but his mind kept drifting back to the phone call, the voice, the handprint, Emily. Around noon, there was another knock at the door. Robert tensed. He wasn't in the mood for more concerned neighbors. But when he opened the door, it wasn't a neighbor. It was Dr. Nathan Cross, Emily's widower, 42 years old, tall and lean, with dark hair graying at the temples and a calm, composed demeanor that always made Robert uneasy. He wore a tailored black coat and carried a leather folder under one arm. Robert, Nathan said with a warm, practiced smile. I hope I'm not intruding. The Callahans called me. They said you seemed distressed last night. Robert's jaw clenched. I'm fine. Nathan stepped inside without being invited, setting the folder on the coffee table. I know this time of year is difficult. Grief doesn't follow a calendar. Sometimes it hits us when we least expect it. I said, I'm fine, Nathan. Nathan sat down on the couch, crossing his legs with the ease of someone used to being in control. His expression was sympathetic, professional. Robert, I'm not here as your therapist. I'm here as family. But I am concerned. The Callahans said you were outside in the rain, shouting at someone who wasn't there. Robert's fists clenched. It was nothing. Was it about Emily? Silence. Nathan leaned forward, his voice soft and measured. Robert, it's very common for people experiencing prolonged grief to have episodes, auditory hallucinations, visual disturbances. The mind can play tricks on us, especially when we're isolated and not sleeping well. I heard her, Nathan. I heard Emily's voice. Nathan didn't react. He just nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he already suspected. I believe you heard something, but what you heard was your brain trying to cope with loss. It's not real, Robert. Emily is gone. She knew things no one else could know. Like what? Robert hesitated. A phrase, something Margaret used to say. And you remember that phrase, so your subconscious pulled it from your memory and inserted it into the hallucination. That's textbook grief-induced psychosis. Robert wanted to argue, but the words stuck in his throat. What if Nathan was right? What if he was losing his mind? Nathan stood, picking up the folder. I want you to consider something. I know you don't like the idea of therapy, but there are options. Medication can help with the hallucinations, and if things get worse, there are facilities, residential care, just temporarily, until you're stable. Robert's blood ran cold. You want to lock me up. I want to help you. Nathan's voice was calm, steady, infuriatingly reasonable. You're alone in this house, Robert. You're not eating properly. You're not sleeping. And now you're hearing voices. This isn't sustainable. Get out. Nathan paused, then sighed. All right, but I'm leaving this folder here. It has information about treatment options. Please, just look at it. For Emily's sake. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Robert stood in the middle of the living room, shaking with rage and fear. Facilities, medication, grief-induced psychosis. Was that what this was? Was he really losing his mind? He looked at the folder on the coffee table, didn't touch it. Instead, he walked upstairs to Emily's old bedroom. It was exactly as she'd left it. Bed made, books on the shelf, photographs on the wall, a few stuffed animals from her childhood still lined up on the dresser. Robert sat on the edge of the bed and buried his face in his hands. Emily, he whispered, if you're really here, I need you to show me. I need to know I'm not crazy. The room was silent, but when he looked up, he saw it. On the wall, behind a framed photograph of Emily and Margaret at the beach, Something was sticking out, a corner of paper, folded and tucked behind the frame. Robert stood, his heart pounding, and pulled the photograph off the wall. A letter fell into his hands. His hands trembled as he unfolded it. "Dad, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need to write it down. I need someone to know the truth. I think Nathan is cheating on me. I don't have proof, but I feel it. He's been distant, secretive. He comes home late and smells like someone else's perfume. When I ask him about it, he turns it around on me. Says I'm paranoid, insecure, that I need help. Maybe I do, maybe I'm going crazy, but I don't think so. He's been controlling me, Dad. Little things at first. Who I see, where I go. He doesn't like it when I visit you. He says you enable my dependency, but I think he just wants to keep me isolated. I'm scared of him. Last week I found something on his computer. Patient files, videos of his therapy sessions. One of them was a woman who looked just like me, Dad. Same hair, same eyes. He was asking her about her family, about feeling abandoned. It felt wrong. I tried to ask him about it, and he got angry, really angry. He said I was violating his trust, that I had no right to go through his things. He grabbed my arm so hard it left a bruise. I'm afraid, Dad. I don't know what to do. If something happens to me, don't believe everything Nathan tells you. Please, I love you." Emily Roberts' hands shook so hard he nearly dropped the letter. Emily had been afraid. Of Nathan. She'd suspected him of cheating, of controlling her, of something worse. And 6 months after she wrote this letter, she was dead. Robert sank to his knees, the letter clutched in his hands, and for the first time in 4 years, he let himself believe something he'd been too afraid to consider. What if it wasn't an accident? Robert didn't leave Emily's room for hours. He sat on the floor, his back against the bed, the letter in his lap, reading it over and over, until the words blurred together. I'm scared of him. Don't believe everything Nathan tells you. The memory of Emily's funeral flashed through his mind. Nathan, standing beside the casket in a perfectly tailored black suit, his face composed, his eyes dry. He'd given a beautiful eulogy, talked about how much he loved Emily, how her death had shattered him, how he'd never stop missing her. Everyone had believed him, including Robert. But what if it had all been a lie? What if Nathan had killed her? Robert's stomach twisted. He wanted to vomit, scream, tear the house apart, but he couldn't. Not yet. He needed to think. He needed proof. He folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his pocket. Then he stood, his legs unsteady, and walked downstairs. It was nearly 5 p.m. The sky outside was darkening, heavy clouds threatening more rain. Robert picked up his cell phone, something he rarely used, and scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for. Luke Hayes, his nephew, his late brother's son. Luke was 32, sharp as a knife, and worked as a freelance journalist and podcaster. He specialized in cold cases, unsolved mysteries, and stories that didn't add up. If anyone could help Robert figure out what really happened to Emily, it was Luke. Robert dialed. The phone rang 3 times before Luke picked up. "Uncle Rob." Luke's voice was surprised but warm. "Hey, it's been a while. Everything okay?" "No," Robert said quietly. "I need your help." There was a pause. "What's going on? Can you come to Portland as soon as possible?" Yeah, of course, I can drive up tonight. What's this about?" Robert hesitated. How did he even begin to explain? "It's about Emily," he said finally. I think someone killed her." Another pause. Longer this time. "I'll be there in 3 hours," Luke said. Luke arrived just after 8 p.m., pulling up in a beat-up Honda Civic with a duffel bag and a laptop case slung over his shoulder. He was tall and lean like his father had been, with messy brown hair and sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Uncle Rob," he said, pulling Robert into a quick hug. "You look like hell." "Thanks." Luke stepped inside, glancing around the house. "So, you sounded pretty rattled on the phone. What's going on?" Robert led him into the living room and handed him the letter. Luke read it in silence, his expression darkening with every line. When he finished, he looked up. "Jesus. Did you know about any of this?" "No, I found it today hidden behind a picture frame in her room. And Nathan never mentioned it. Nathan told me Emily was unstable, that she'd been struggling with anxiety and depression, that the accident was just tragic timing." Luke set the letter down on the coffee table and pulled out his laptop. "All right, let's start from the beginning. Tell me everything you remember about the accident." Robert sank into his chair, his voice low and heavy. "It was October, 4 years ago. Emily was driving home from a therapy appointment. ironically with Nathan. She called me around 7 p.m. to say she was on her way. Said she wanted to stop by for dinner, but she never made it. Her car went off Highway 26, down an embankment. She died on impact. Who found her? A passing driver called 911. By the time the paramedics got there, she was already gone. Luke typed quickly, pulling up news articles on his screen. And Nathan identified the body? Yes, he handled everything. The funeral arrangements. The paperwork. I couldn't function. I was still grieving Margaret. Losing Emily broke me. Luke nodded, his eyes scanning the screen. Did the police investigate? They ruled it an accident. Said she lost control on a wet road. Did they check the car? I don't know. Luke leaned back, rubbing his jaw. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to request the police report and the autopsy. I'm also going to see if I can get access to the vehicle inspection records. If there was foul play, there'll be traces. And if there aren't? Luke looked at him seriously. Then we keep digging until we find the truth. Robert nodded, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest for the first time in years. But then his phone rang. He looked down. Unknown number. His blood turned cold. Answer it, Luke said, already pulling out his own phone. I'll record. Robert picked up, his hand shaking. Hello? Static, breathing, and then that voice. Dad. Luke's eyes widened. He hit record. Emily? Robert whispered. I've been trapped, Dad, between life and death. He won't let me go. Who, Nathan? Don't trust him? He's watching you. He knows you're digging. Robert's heart hammered. How do I find you? How do I prove what he did? Go back to where I was born. The truth is buried there. The line went dead. Robert stared at the phone, his entire body shaking. Luke played back the recording, his face pale. Uncle Rob, who the hell was that? I don't know, Robert whispered. But I'm starting to think Emily is trying to tell us something. If you've made it this far, leave a comment with your thoughts. It really helps the channel grow. The next morning, Luke was up before dawn, hunched over his laptop at the kitchen table, 3 empty coffee mugs beside him. Robert found him there, bleary-eyed and still in yesterday's clothes. Did you sleep? Robert asked. No, but I found something. Luke turned the laptop around. On the screen was a scanned police report from Emily's accident. The responding officer was a guy named Tom Bradley, 30-year veteran by the book. According to his notes, Emily's car showed signs of brake failure, cause undetermined. But here's the thing, he recommended a full forensic inspection of the vehicle. And it never happened. The case was closed 3 days later, ruled accidental. No follow-up, no investigation. Robert's jaw clenched. Why? Because someone with influence made it go away. And guess who was listed as the primary contact for all official communications? Nathan. Bingo. Luke pulled up another document, a mechanic's report. I also tracked down the tow yard that impounded Emily's car after the crash. They kept it for 6 weeks before it was released to Nathan, who had it scrapped immediately. But before it was destroyed, one of the mechanics took photos for his own records. Look at this. He zoomed in on a grainy photo of the underside of Emily's car. Even Robert, who knew nothing about cars, could see that something was wrong. The brake lines looked cut, frayed, deliberately severed. This wasn't an accident, Luke said quietly. This was murder. Robert's hands balled into fists. We need to go to the police. With what? A 4-year-old photo from a mechanic who's probably retired? A letter Emily wrote before she died? It's not enough. We need more. Robert's phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Riverview Clinic, basement, records room, before they're gone. Robert showed Luke. This is where she told me to go, where Emily was born. Riverview Clinic? Luke pulled it up on his phone. That place shut down 8 years ago. It's been abandoned ever since. Then we need to go. Now. Riverview Clinic sat on the outskirts of Portland. A squat, ugly building surrounded by chain-link fence and overgrown weeds. The windows were boarded up, the walls covered in graffiti. A rusted sign hung crookedly by the entrance. Riverview Women's Health, closed. Luke, parked across the street. You sure about this? No, Robert said, but we're doing it anyway. They found a side door with a broken lock and slipped inside. The air was thick with mold and decay. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating peeling wallpaper and shattered tiles. They found the stairs to the basement at the end of a long hallway. Stay close, Luke whispered. The basement was worse. Water dripped from the ceiling. Rats scurried in the shadows. And at the far end of the room, half buried under debris, were rows of rusted file cabinets. Luke and Robert dug through them for nearly an hour, pulling out water-damaged folders and crumbling papers. Most were illegible, but then Luke found it. "Uncle Rob, look." He held up a birth certificate, Margaret Hayes, October 12th, 1988. But something was wrong. The numbers had been scratched out and rewritten, dates changed, and in the margins, in faded ink, someone had written, "Twin B, private adoption, arranged by Dr. H. Frost." Robert's blood ran cold. "Twin?" Luke's face was pale. "Emily had a twin sister, and someone gave her up for adoption. But Margaret never told me. She would have, unless she didn't know." Luke flipped through more files. "Look at this, Dr. Harold Frost. He was the obstetrician who delivered Emily, but according to these notes, he was under investigation in the 90s for facilitating illegal adoptions. He'd tell mothers one of their babies didn't survive, then sell the child to wealthy families." Robert felt like the floor was dropping out from under him. "So somewhere out there, Emily has a twin sister who doesn't even know she exists." "Had," Luke corrected quietly. "Emily's dead. But her sister," he trailed off, pulling up something on his phone. "I need to make some calls." Over the next 2 days, Luke worked his contacts, journalists, private investigators, people who owed him favors. He tracked down adoption records, cross-referenced names, and finally found what he was looking for. "Daniel and Laura Morrison," Luke said, showing Robert a photograph. "They adopted a baby girl in October 1988 through Dr. Frost, paid him under the table. The girl's name is Sophie Morrison." Robert stared at the photo. Sophie was in her early 30s with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and sad, searching eyes. She looked exactly like Emily. "Where is she now?" Robert asked. Luke hesitated. "That's the part you're not going to like." He pulled up another document. "Sophie's been in therapy for years. Severe depression, identity issues, feelings of not belonging. And guess who her therapist is?" Robert's stomach dropped. "Dr. Nathan Cross." Luke paced back and forth across Robert's living room, laptop balanced on one arm, phone pressed to his ear. "Yeah, I need everything you've got on Dr. Nathan Cross," he said to whoever was on the other end. "Employment history, patient complaints, malpractice suits, everything." He hung up and looked at Robert. "Nathan's been Sophie's therapist for 3 years, and according to her medical records, she's been struggling with the fact that she's adopted and doesn't know where she came from." "So he knows," Robert said, his voice tight with anger. "He knows Sophie is Emily's twin, and he's been using her. Looks like it. But we need proof, hard evidence that ties him to Emily's death and to whatever he's been doing with Sophie." Robert clenched his fists. "How do we get that?" Luke thought for a moment. "Nathan's a therapist. He keeps records, session notes, recordings, files on his patients. If we can access those, we might find something." "You want to break into his office?" "I want to break into his server." Luke opened his laptop. "Nathan runs his practice out of a clinic downtown. I'm betting his patient files are stored digitally. If I can get his login credentials, I can access them remotely." "And how do we get his login?" Luke smirked. "We already have it. Remember Emily's letter? She mentioned finding videos on his computer. My guess is she knew his passwords." Robert's mind flashed back to the letter, to the phrase Emily had written, the one she and Margaret used to say. "When we're afraid of the dark, we light the fire inside our hearts." "Try light in the heart," Robert said. "All one word, lowercase." Luke typed it in. A loading screen appeared. Then a login portal. "Access granted." "Holy shit," Luke whispered. "We're in." The files were organized by patient name. Luke scrolled through dozens of them until he found what he was looking for. Morrison Sophie active patient. He clicked. A folder opened, filled with session notes, audio recordings, and video files. Luke opened the first video. The screen showed a small therapy room, soft lighting, a couch, and sitting on that couch, looking small and broken, was Sophie Morrison. She looked exactly like Emily. Same dark hair, same sad eyes, same delicate hands folded nervously in her lap. Nathan's voice came from off-camera, smooth and calm. "Tell me about the dreams, Sophie." "They're always the same," Sophie said, her voice trembling. "I'm standing in front of a house I've never seen before. Someone's calling my name, but it's not my name. It's someone else's." "What name?" "Emily." Robert's breath caught. "And how does that make you feel?" Nathan asked. "Like I'm not who I'm supposed to be, like I'm living someone else's life." Nathan was silent for a moment. Then, have you ever considered that? Maybe you're right? That maybe you are living someone else's life? Sophie looked up, confused. What do you mean? I mean that adoption is a trauma, Sophie. You were taken from your birth mother. Someone made a choice for you, and that choice has shaped your entire existence. It's not your fault that you feel lost. But why Emily? Sophie whispered. Why do I keep hearing that name? Nathan leaned forward. Because Emily was your sister, your twin, and she's dead. Sophie's face went pale. What? I have the records, Sophie. I've known for months. Your birth mother gave birth to twins. One was kept, one was sold. You were the one who was sold. Tears streamed down Sophie's face. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to wait until you were ready. But now I think it's time. There's someone you need to meet. The video cut off. Luke and Robert stared at the screen in stunned silence. He's been manipulating her, Luke said quietly, feeding her information bit by bit, convincing her that she was abandoned, that her birth family didn't want her. But why? Robert asked. What does he gain from this? Luke opened another video. This one was more recent, dated just 2 weeks ago. Nathan's face appeared on screen this time. He was speaking directly to the camera. Sophie has proven to be remarkably suggestible, he said clinically, as if presenting a case study. Her desperation to belong makes her the perfect subject. I've introduced the idea that her birth father Robert Hayes is the one who gave her up, that he kept Emily and discarded her like trash. The resentment is building beautifully. Robert felt sick. My plan is simple, Nathan continued. Sophie will be my instrument. She'll call Robert, appear at his door, leave traces of her presence, all while I convince him that he's losing his mind. Once he's discredited, once everyone believes he's suffering from grief-induced psychosis, I'll have him declared incompetent. I'll take control of his estate, his assets, everything. And if he becomes too much of a problem, well, accidents happen. The video ended. Luke sat back, his face pale. He's going to kill you. Robert's hands shook. We need to stop him. We will, but first, we need to talk to Sophie. Finding Sophie wasn't hard. Luke had her address from the patient files. She lived in a small apartment in northeast Portland, a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and old brick buildings. They knocked on her door at 9 a.m. on a gray, drizzly Saturday morning. Sophie answered. She looked exactly like the woman in the videos, tired, fragile, haunted. When she saw Robert, her eyes widened. You, she whispered. Sophie, Robert said gently. We need to talk. She tried to close the door, but Luke stopped it with his foot. Please, just 5 minutes, that's all we're asking. Sophie hesitated. Then, slowly, she stepped aside. They sat in her small living room. Sophie perched on the edge of the couch, arms wrapped around herself, looking like she might bolt at any moment. I know who you are, she said quietly. Dr. Cross told me. You're Robert Hayes, my birth father. I didn't know you existed, Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. Not until 3 days ago. Your mother and I, we thought we only had one daughter. We didn't know about you. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. He said you gave me away, that you kept Emily and got rid of me. That's a lie. Robert pulled out the documents Luke had found. The altered birth certificate, the records from Riverview Clinic. Your mother gave birth to twins, but the doctor, a man named Harold Frost, told her that one of the babies didn't survive. He lied. He sold you to another family. We never knew. Sophie stared at the papers, her hands trembling. He lied to me. Nathan's been lying to you about everything, Luke said. He pulled out his laptop and played one of the recorded therapy sessions. He's been using you, Sophie, manipulating you to make Robert think he's losing his mind. As Sophie watched the video, her face went from confusion to horror to rage. He made me call him, she whispered. Late at night, he gave me a script, told me exactly what to say. He said it was part of my healing process, that confronting my birth father would give me closure. He used your pain, Robert said softly. He used your need to belong, and I'm so sorry. Sophie looked at him, tears streaming down her face. Did you love her, Emily? More than anything. Do you, her voice broke, do you think you could love me too? Robert's heart shattered. He moved to sit beside her and took her hands in his. You're my daughter. I didn't know you existed, but you're my daughter. And yes, I already do. Sophie collapsed into his arms, sobbing. They spent the next hour filling Sophie in on everything. Emily's letter, the evidence of foul play in the accident, Nathan's plan to have Robert declared incompetent. We need to stop him, Sophie said, her voice hardening. "He's destroyed so many lives, Emily's, yours, mine. He has to pay." "He will," Luke said. "But we need to be smart. We need to catch him in the act." "How?" Robert asked. Luke thought for a moment. "We set a trap. Robert, you call Nathan. Tell him you've decided to accept his help, that you're ready to sign the papers to enter a care facility. Ask him to come to your house tonight, alone, to finalize everything. And then we record him, get him to confess. Once we have that, we take it to the police." Sophie nodded. "I'll be there. He won't expect me to turn on him." Robert looked at her. "Are you sure? This could be dangerous." Sophie's jaw set. "He used me to hurt you, to hurt Emily's memory. I'm sure." That evening, Robert called Nathan. "I've been thinking about what you said," Robert said, keeping his voice shaky and defeated. "About the care facility. Maybe you're right. Maybe I do need help." There was a pause on the other end. Then, Nathan's smooth, calm voice. "I'm glad you're being reasonable, Robert. This is the best choice for everyone. Can you come by tonight? I want to get this over with. Sign the papers. I want it done." "Of course. I'll be there at 10. Luke hid a phone in the bookshelf, camera facing the living room. Sophie waited in the kitchen, out of sight. Robert sat in his armchair, heart pounding, waiting. At exactly 10 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Robert opened it. Nathan stood there in a tailored grey suit, carrying a leather briefcase, smiling warmly. "Robert, thank you for doing this. I know it's not easy. Let's just get it over with." They sat in the living room. Nathan opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents: power of attorney forms, medical consent papers, psychiatric evaluation requests. "These will allow me to make decisions on your behalf," Nathan said smoothly. "For your own safety, of course." Robert stared at the papers. His hands shook, not from fear, this time, but from rage. "You want to lock me up," he said quietly. "I want to help you, Robert. You've been hallucinating, hearing voices, seeing Emily where she isn't. You need professional care." "Like you helped Emily?" Nathan's smile faltered. "What?" Robert pulled out the letter. "I found this, hidden in her room. She was afraid of you, Nathan. She knew you were controlling her. She suspected you were cheating, and she was right, wasn't she?" Nathan's expression went cold. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I also know about Sophie." Nathan froze. "Emily's twin sister," Robert continued, his voice steady now. "The one you've been manipulating for 3 years. The one you used to make me think I was losing my mind." Nathan stood slowly. "You can't prove any of that." "Actually," Luke said, stepping out from the hallway with his phone raised, "we can. We've got your therapy recordings, your confession on video, and Sophie's testimony." Nathan's jaw clenched. "Sophie would never—" "I already have," Sophie said, stepping out of the kitchen. Her voice was strong, clear. "You used me. You made me believe my own father abandoned me. You made me torture him, but I know the truth now." Nathan stared at her, and for the first time, the mask cracked. His calm composure shattered, replaced by cold fury. "You stupid girl," he hissed. "You were nothing before I found you. A broken, pathetic—" "Enough," Robert said, standing. "It's over, Nathan. We have everything. The evidence about Emily's car, the adoption records, your recordings, the police are on their way." Nathan's eyes darted to the door. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a syringe. "I'm not going down for this," he said, voice shaking. "I'll sedate you both. Make it look like Robert had a breakdown, attacked me. No one will believe you." He lunged at Robert. Sophie screamed. Luke grabbed a lamp and swung it, hitting Nathan across the shoulder. The syringe clattered to the floor. Nathan stumbled, then turned and ran for the door. But Roger Callahan was standing there, blocking his path, cane raised. "I already called the cops, son. They're 2 minutes out." Nathan tried to push past him, but Roger swung the cane, catching Nathan across the knees. He went down hard. The police arrived moments later. Nathan was arrested, still screaming that Robert was the crazy one, that this was all a misunderstanding. But the evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the documents, Sophie's testimony, the mechanic's photos of Emily's car. Within hours, the truth started to come out. Other patients came forward, accusing Nathan of manipulation, coercion, and abuse. The investigation into Emily's death was reopened, and Robert, for the first time in 4 years, felt like he could breathe. 3 months later, the house on Maple Street wasn't quiet anymore. Sophie had moved into Emily's old room, not to replace her, but to honor her. She'd hung new photos on the walls, painted over the E. Old ones made the space her own while still keeping a few of Emily's things, a stuffed bear from childhood, a framed photo of the three of them, Robert, Margaret and Emily, at the beach. Luke visited every weekend. He'd turned the case into a podcast series, but he'd done it with care, with respect. The focus wasn't on the horror, but on the truth, on how one man had used grief and pain as weapons, and how a family had fought back. Nathan Cross was awaiting trial. The charges were extensive: murder, fraud, manipulation of vulnerable patients, obstruction of justice. His pristine reputation was in ruins. And Robert was learning how to live again. One evening, Robert and Sophie sat on the porch together, watching the rain. It was November again, 4 years and 3 months since Emily's death. "Do you ever hear her?" Sophie asked quietly. "Emily?" Robert thought about the phone calls, the voice at 1 a.m., the footprints. "No," he said, "not anymore. But I think that was never really her. It was you. Nathan used you to make me believe Emily was haunting me. But in a strange way, it brought us together." Sophie nodded. "I like to think she helped, that somehow she knew, that she led us to each other." Robert smiled. "Maybe she did." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Sophie said, "I visited her grave yesterday. I brought flowers. I told her I'd take care of you." Robert's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. And I told her I was sorry that I didn't know her, but that I wish I had." "She would have loved you," Robert said. "You're just like her. Strong, kind, stubborn as hell." Sophie laughed through her tears. That night, Robert woke up at 12:58 a.m. For a moment, his heart raced. He looked at the clock, listened for the phone, but the house was silent. Sophie was asleep in the next room. Luke had texted the family group chat earlier. "Good night, you two. Love you." Robert got out of bed and walked to the window. The street was dark and still. No shadows, no footprints, no voices calling from the porch. He walked downstairs and stood in front of the door. For so long, this door had been a source of terror, but now it was just a door. He unlocked it and stepped outside. The air was cold and clean. The rain had stopped. Stars peeked through the clouds. "Emily," Robert said softly, looking up at the sky, "if you can hear me, thank you. Thank you for bringing Sophie into my life. Thank you for not letting me give up. I promise I'll take care of her. I promise I'll make you proud." The wind rustled through the trees, and for just a moment, Robert could have sworn he heard her voice. "When we're afraid of the dark, we light the fire inside our hearts." He smiled. Then he went back inside, locked the door and went to bed. For the first time in 4 years, Robert Hayes slept in peace. If this story touched your heart, share the video. You never know who might need to hear something like this.